I just got back from a vacation and I realized that I didn't have a video on the content schedule for this Thursday, and it's Wednesday, so that is literally tomorrow. So I'm filming this video a bit last minute, but I wanted to get something out to you anyway, because a couple weeks ago I watched a video by Sarah Caroli where she recommended books for whatever mood you're in, and I thought it would be a really fun idea to recreate her video. So today I'm going to be giving you guys book recommendations, pretty rapid fire, I think, for 5 different just moods of reading. So I'll have timestamps down below in the description box, but let's just get started with the most fun one, arguably, which is happy and lighthearted. And by the way, I'm looking over here because I have my computer on my bed with me. The first book I want to talk about is one that I finished last month, and that is Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. This is a really fun book about 2 college kids, a swimmer and a diver, and their romance. And the book is marketed as they are into more like sexual kinks and stuff like that than some other of Ali's books. And I feel like that's a lot of things that people criticize this book for, is that it really didn't dive into that very much. But honestly, I felt like it wasn't anything out of the blue and crazy, but it was still a really fun romance. I enjoyed myself a lot while reading it. I was just giggling at the audiobook so much. By the way, if you read it, listen to the audiobook, because the Swedish accent that the guy has in their dual POV chapters are just so good. It's delicious, honestly. So if you wanted to have a really fun time with a romance, check out Deep End. By the way, cars outside, AC is blasting. Like, this is not the best quality video, especially with the audio, I don't think, but again, it's last minute, so we're just trying our best today, okay? Next is Lights Out by Nevessa Allen. This is a dark romance, a stalker romance actually, but I thought it was so much fun, and it's because Nevessa is really good at blending dark topics with something lighthearted and funny, like just comedy. The main guy character in this book, Josh, is literally laugh out loud funny. Like, he's so goofy and stupid in some ways that it's just like, yes, is he stalking, but like he's not malintended like some other stalker books that I've read and hated. I feel like this one is just so much fun. This is also one that's a little kinky. Josh is a mask talk creator, if you know what that is, so like there's elements of that in this book, but I think that he's just such a funny character, and also Ali as well. They just really bounce off each other super well. There was one point where Josh is trying to like break into her house, and he broke in way too easily, so he like bought her a security system to like make her house more defensible against other people because he thinks that it was stupid that he could get in so easily. Stuff like that. It's just like goofy, self-aware humor of the type of book it is, so I really enjoyed Nevessa Allen's Lights Out. The Windy City series, this is one that I've been really loving recently. I still need to read the 4th book because the 5th one comes out this year, but it's a series of sports romances following a friend group of athletes and their separate romantic interests. So the first one is hockey, the second one is basketball, and the next 2 are baseball, and I think the last one that's going to come out this year is also going to be hockey to finish out the series. Overall, these are just really well-rounded romance books, contemporary romance books specifically. I think that all the characters are really well fleshed out. They each have their own issues that they work through in the books, and I think that their stories are just beautiful, but also it's just really funny. A couple of the characters are quite humorous. Like, I really like Rio and Isaiah. They're just like so goofy and funny, and so it's good for a laugh, but it's also really sweet and emotional. I think the romances were just done so well in all 3 of the books that I read so far. They were all given above a 4-star for me, and I only expect that same exact rating for the last 2 books that I haven't read yet. Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. Honestly, any book by Abby Jimenez in her most recent series I think is really just beautiful and heartwarming, but specifically Yours Truly I really enjoyed, and that is because it follows, I think her name is Brianna, and she's a nurse, and then Jacob, I'm pretty sure his name is the love interest, so I think he's a doctor in the same department, I want to say. It's been a hot second since I've read this book, okay? I'm like getting tripped up on the details here, but what's amazing about this book is there's a lot of anxiety representation in this book, especially with the guy POV, which I don't think we see a lot of. I wouldn't say it's a very sad and emotional, like overly emotional book, which is why it's in the heartwarming category and not like the tearjerker category, but I do think there are some really touching moments in this book, especially with Jacob dealing with his anxiety and working through mental health, and also Brianna's issues and them helping each other. I think it's just a really sweet romance. I relate a lot to Jacob and a lot of the things that he was talking about, and it was just like such a warm hug, I think, to read. So if you want something very comforting and is a really nice romance, anything by her would be a safe bet to pick up. And lastly, for this category, I want to talk about the Heartstopper series. This is a series of graphic novels. I'm pretty sure that they were like webtoon comics or something like that. I may be totally wrong, but I read this like digitally before I got the physical copies, and then they continued to be released. 5 volumes are already out. The 6th and last one is coming out either this year or next, I want to say, but it's just so sweet. This follows Nick and Charlie, 2 boys in high school, and their friendship and eventual romance, and also all the friends around them and their different aspects of their life and their romance. It's just a beautiful story of like students in high school, you know, learning who they are, growing as people, finding friendships, finding connections. I would say that there are a couple trigger warnings in this book as far as like bullying. Later on in the series, we get more into eating disorders and mental health struggles, especially with Charlie. But the earlier ones especially, you can literally read in a matter of hours. It's a graphic novel, but it just makes you feel so warm and comforted afterwards, and I just really love this book. And the show is also really good and really accurate to the book, so Heartstopper is amazing and really, really light and heartwarming. All right, so moving into the sad tearjerker section of the video. So these are books that are kind of verging on the end of that last category, but are really diving into this book will make you cry. But sometimes you're in the mood for that, you know, at least I am. So the first book on this list is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. This is my first and only Kristen Hanna book I've ever read, but I really want to read more because her historical fiction was so good. This follows two sisters in World War II France as they deal with obviously war-torn country, Nazi invasion, and all the things that happen after that. This book is heartbreaking because you know bad things are going to happen. If you know anything about the Holocaust or World War II, you know that they are in dangerous situations, and your heart is just like beating faster and faster as you read the book because you're just waiting for the inevitable terrors that are going to happen, which is awful to say, but it's true. That being said, this book, I wouldn't say it had a super happy ending. It wasn't a Little Life level, at least from what I've heard of a Little Life. I feel like this is like a somewhat happy ending, but I definitely did cry. In fact, I vlogged it and I did cry a lot in that vlog. It was an experience, but it was a really emotional one, and one that I'm very glad that I went through because this was, I think, 4 or 4.5 stars. Next is Binding 13. This is the first book in the Boys of Tommen series, which is a series of contemporary romances set in Ireland in around 2005 or 6. So a bunch of high school kids dealing with stuff, and honestly every book in this series is a really good mix between really sweet and heartwarming to really devastating and traumatic things happening to these students. Just to start out with the first book, Shannon is the main girl character, and she grows up in a domestically abusive household. So she has a lot of siblings and they all struggle with abuse from specifically their father, but also in some ways from their mother, and watching her have to deal with that and grow through that, and then also finding healing in people that she meets at school, and eventually a romance with this boy named Johnny. It's really sweet, but it's really sad as well. So huge trigger warnings for this book. Please check them out if you can't read anything about like domestic violence, abuse, like physical, emotional things like that. But if you are okay reading stuff like that, this really is a romance that will change your life because it hits and packs so much more of a punch than other books. Long Shot by Kennedy Ryan is the next book. I haven't read this book in years, okay, so my description is going to be very short, but this is another one that deals with domestic violence. This one specifically between partners, not between like parents and children. So in this book we have our main girl, I think her name is Iris, and she is married, but she is in a domestically abusive relationship with her husband, and so this book is the story of her escaping that situation and finding a better life for herself. She meets this new guy who is a basketball player, and so it's a story of her kind of getting to heal with this new guy and change her life around. Overall, it's a very beautiful story because she does have a happy ending at the end, but it does again deal with a lot of triggering topics like domestic violence and abuse, so keep that in mind when listening to this. But I do think that overall Kennedy Ryan is another author that always packs another punch into her romances than just any other contemporary rom-com kind of thing, and I think that if you want a romance book that's going to just hit you in the feels, picking up something by Kennedy will definitely check that box. Specifically Long Shot for me was just so amazing. I think I gave it either 4 or 5 stars. It was so good. And last in this category we have Song of Achilles. Now there are going to be more books in this video that are sad, but I feel like these are just the ones that really fit into the tearjerker category. And Song of Achilles for me, I read at least, I think it was 4 years ago. It's been a hot second. I really deserve a reread, but I'm scared to reread it, if that tells you anything about what my feelings are for this book. This is a well, not really a modern retelling. It's the story of Achilles and Patroclus. So if you know anything about Greek mythology, there are definitely stories. I don't know if they're like in what book, if it's like the Iliad or whatever, but there are stories about Achilles and Patroclus, but Madeline Miller takes the little snippets that we get and like fleshes it into this full-blown extended story. She makes Greek mythology much more accessible, I feel, because the way that it's written is obviously easier than reading the original Greek stuff. That being said, her language is very flowery and beautiful, and it's really just an immersive artistic experience to read their story. But if you know the story of Achilles and Patroclus, their story does end in complete tragedy. So it's not really a surprise, but it is like a pit in your stomach as you wait for the end to come. And when I tell you, I sobbed so hard at the end of this book, which is why I'm scared to reread it, because it was that emotionally hitting for me. So yeah, super sad. But if you're in the mood for that, this one will definitely do the trick. So now we're going to move on to adventurous and thrilling books. These are kind of a mix between like fantasy journey books and then books with more suspense in them that I've read. Now I don't read many thrillers. In fact, I've only read like one official thriller, I want to say, but I do have a couple ideas in here. So number 1 is Fourth Wing. If you haven't heard about this book, you definitely are not on my channel before. You might be new here because I talk about this series a lot. But Fourth Wing, to sum it up very quickly, follows a girl named Violet who goes to this dragon riding school and learns to ride dragons, and also has an enemies to lovers romance plot with this guy named Xaden. This book is a perfect book if you're trying to get into fantasy because it is incredibly fast-paced, so interesting. The characters are so great. The plot is always moving and thrilling you, and you're just like always doing something else. So it's never boring. It's never stagnant. And that's why I always recommend this book to new fantasy readers, because it will absolutely just hook you in, and then you'll be stuck and obsessed with the series like the rest of us, okay? The Mind series by St. Abbey is so good. And this one is great because it's honestly one big chunky book. I mean, okay, it's 5 books, but they're all about 100 pages. And so sometimes they're read individually, sometimes they're sold in one big book, but it's honestly something you can finish in about less than a week because they just go by so fast. This is a series that follows a girl named Lana, who is a female serial killer. I support women's rights and I also support women's wrongs, okay? But it is her romance between her and the FBI agent on her case, which is such an incredible plot. I was like, oh my goodness, I am intrigued. And the great thing about this story is that they're told in 100-page books, basically. And so every book is incredibly fast-paced. It sucks you in, and then it gives you a huge plot twist at the end. And so you have no choice but to move on to the next 100 pages, like instantly. And so that's why I say you can whip through this book so fast, and it's so thrilling because it really does like keep you on your toes. Now, this book is incredibly graphic, not only with like physical violence, but also sexual violence. So please keep that in mind when you read this book or before you read it. But that being said, it's a 5-star series for me. It is so incredible. Now, the one and only thriller or actual thriller that I've read so far that I just finished actually last week that I wanted to talk about is Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. This is a book that follows a married couple on their way to a weekend getaway in northern Scotland, I want to say. Cold winter, they're going to stay in this creepy old deserted church, which was honestly their first mistake, to be honest. But it follows their story, and the reason that they're going is because their marriage is in trouble. They're on the brink of divorce, and we're trying to figure out like what their history is, who is the reliable narrator, because we get different POVs and they're all kind of saying different things. And to be honest, getting towards the middle of this book, I was just like, okay, wrap it up, move on, you know? I wasn't really too interested, but then at the very end, we get a crazy plot twist that I was like, oh my gosh, it all makes sense, but it doesn't, but it does. You know what I'm saying? You're not going to expect it. You're going to think something else because she kind of leads you up to thinking this, and then she flips it. It's like actually this. And so that's why I'm just like, wow, she like really manipulated our minds basically while writing this book. And I thought it was so good. So if you want a really cool thriller with an interesting plot twist, pick up Rock, Paper, Scissors. And of course, I can't end this section without talking about Throne of Glass, my love, my baby, my everything, my favorite series of all time. I'm really not going to say much about this book because it has been said enough on my channel. But in the main book, the first book, we follow our main character, Selena, who is an assassin, and she was living or being tortured basically in the salt mines of Endovier for about a year, which is like a slave camp. And she gets removed by the king because the king wants her to compete to become his champion. So that's how we start the series, but it really goes off the rails from there. I can't really explain. There's just so much plot in this book. It blows my mind that this is Sarah J. Maas's first ever published work because her plot by the end of the series is so intertwined. Every little dot is connected. Every piece makes sense. There's a puzzle at the end. It is incredible. It is dedication to get through 8 books, I know, but trust me when I tell you that this series, when you finish it, will change your life. You'll love the plot. You'll love the characters. And I need to shut up. So I'm gonna stop talking about Throne of Glass, but if you want the most incredible fantasy series you'll ever read, okay? Pick up this one. Okay, so the next category is mysterious and gloomy. These are books that gave me like very cozy thunderstorm reading vibes. Pull up a blanket, a cup of tea, and get cozy for these books because they will get you in that mood. So the first one on this list is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. This book is a YA actually, and it follows the story of 6 different kids who for some reason are all teenagers. In my mind, they have to be at least like 23, but they're all teenagers because it is a YA book, and they all come together to do this heist. They come from all different parts of this fantastical world. They all have very different talents, very different skill sets. They all have very different personalities, but they bond over the fact that they want this heist. They need to get this thing and make a lot of money off of it. And also the found family in this is absolutely incredible. Does this book have an amazing plot? Yes. In fact, it's a duology and the plot that is in both books is so good. But more than that, I think just the atmosphere of Ketterdam, it's very grimy, cold, rainy. They're traveling overseas in cold places, going to gambling dens and bars and and things, and just the atmosphere is very, it's a rainy day kind of feeling. And so I really just thought that it would be great for this like mysterious gloomy category. Another book by the same author, Lee Bardugo, is The Familiar, which I recently read last year. This is the story of our main character whose name I forgot and I feel so bad. I don't know if it's like Lucia, I could be totally off, but basically she is a girl with powers. This book takes place in 1500s Madrid, Spain, so it's an interesting mix between like historical fiction and also fantasy elements. But our girl has magic. She is a servant in the house of I wouldn't say aristocrat, but very rich and wealthy couple, and so they start using her magic to get fame and popularity from other people in the city, and the story just goes from there. It has some vampiric elements in it, not so explicitly said, but I do feel like one of the characters, Saint Angel, if you want to say it with a country accent, his character is somewhat described as similar to a vampire, and overall the vibes are very dark night, vampire blood, dark magic in historical Madrid, things like that. So the vibes, again, dark, gloomy, and really interesting. Not similar to anything I've ever read before, but really good. For the Wolf by Hannah Witten is a book that I love and not many people do, unfortunately, but it is a very perfect book for this mysterious and gloomy category because it follows our main character, Roderys. This is actually a Red Riding Hood retelling. She is a second daughter in this kingdom, and the way that it works is the first daughter gets the monarchy and the second goes to the wolf, who is this monster in the woods. The story that continues is very interesting. I really loved the magic system in this book because it has to do with nature and the woods itself having its own entity. It's like an actual being, and so the magic that the woods and the trees and the roots and the ground like sucks out and things like that are just very atmospheric. There's a cottagecore vibe to this book, creepy old castles, traveling in the woods, like things like that. And so if you want something that's perfect to read in the end of autumn where it's like, again, dreary outside, pick up this book. It's really, really good. And also the writing is good, I thought. I really enjoyed this one. And lastly, for this genre, I'm going to put in a classic Dark Academia book, and that is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. I adore this book and it needs to be reread immediately. But this follows 6 students in or is it 7? Maybe it's 7 students in a theater school, and they all are wannabe actors. They're all seniors, basically. So there are other grades too, but the 7 ones are seniors, and they all study Shakespeare. And so throughout the year, they use Shakespeare plays and their performance of the plays to emulate their feelings for each other and the emotion they have for each other and their friendships and relationships and things like that. But one day, one of the 7 or 6, I think it's 7, turns up dead. And so the question is, who did it? What happened? It's a slight like mystery solving kind of thing. It's slight old-fashioned boarding school, theater school, Dark Academia kind of vibes. And I really loved the little hints of romance we got in this book, but also the character development and relationships are so complex and intertwined. It's like incredible to read about. And the writing is so good because it uses Shakespeare in the writing. Emma Rio is a genius. So anyway, this book is so good. Please pick it up. Now the last category of this video, I saved it for last because it's probably the best one if you're in a reading slump and want to get out of it. And that is just some juicy gossip. Like if you want a book that's just going to keep you invested, keep you engaged, these books will do it for you. And number 1 on the list is Magnolia Parks. Well, this one is actually like maybe not the best option because Magnolia Parks does have some incredible character development, but I'm saying this because it follows a group of London socialites who are incredibly rich, fancy, bougie. They all have wealthy parents and they all are very messy. There are multiple different friendships and relationships in this series, and I've only read 2 of the books so far, but I intend to read the rest of them because they are so good. If you hate reading books where the main characters just will not get together or they keep going apart like romantically because of just stupid reasons, I usually do too. That's why I didn't enjoy Love Letter to Whiskey, but Magnolia Parks I ate up. So trust me that this book will pull at your heartstrings, number 1, but also just suck you in because you want to know the story. There's just so much happening. Everyone is attractive, messy, and you just want to know what happens. You really do. So this series, so good. I'm Glad My Mom Died is actually a memoir. This was written by Jeanette McCurdy, who was Sam and Sam and Cat, who you guys watched like Disney Channel a couple years ago, like, I don't know, early 2010s. But this is a memoir that she wrote about her mother and her experience with her mother, because as a child actor, of course, she has a very unique upbringing compared to many other kids, and she had a difficult relationship with her mother because although she appreciated her mother for putting her into this situation where she, made money and she became super popular and stuff, there are also so many downsides to child actors, and her influence that her mother had on her body image, on her personal identity, on her autonomy, things like that are irrevocable. And now her mother is dead, so it's her like recounting everything that happened, her story since she was a kid. This one I really don't want to call like juicy gossip because it is true fact. It's literally her writing her actual story in a memoir. So I'm not trying to disguise this as like just a fun time, because it is like tackling very real issues. But I will say that I'm not usually a nonfiction reader, but this book kept me hooked the entire time, because reading about a child star that we all used to watch on TV was super interesting, and the story itself will keep you engaged. So I'm putting it in this category for that reason. But if you've never read a memoir before, I would recommend something like this to start with. Daisy Jones and the Six is my favorite book by tearjerkers Reid. I just love it. This follows a band in the 1970s, a fictional band, and the messy plot that their story goes through over multiple years as they become incredibly famous in like the 70s and early 80s, and then like what happens as the band falls apart. This is a fictional story, but it's very similar to many other bands that we all think and know of. And this book is really incredible too, because it takes place 100% in interview format. Like literally every single page is just dialogue from different characters being interviewed after, like years later, after the whole thing happened. So it hooks you in because it goes by so fast. There's not like incredible scene description or lengthy prose. It's really just talking and everyone's different point of view and perspective on different things that happen. So it's incredibly interesting. And this is another one where the show is so good. The actors are perfect. The casting is amazing. The plot is so accurate to the book. And what's also awesome is they literally made the songs from the band that tearjerkers Reid wrote in the book. They made them into actual musical performances, and they're available on Spotify. So are a couple of the songs from this fictional band in a book on my playlist? Yeah, they are. Yeah, they are. And I have no shame. I love them. And the last one in this category is The Favorites, which is a recent read of mine, a recent 5-star. And it reminds me of tearjerkers Reid's book because this one is also partially told in interview format. This follows Heath and Kat, who are two ice dancers who want so badly to go and win the Olympics. And so it follows them from childhood to adulthood as they train together, go through ups and downs, meet people, deal with the politics of the ice dancing Olympic world. This story is once again taken after the fact, and they wanted to make a documentary about this fictional ice dancing team that happened in like, I want to say the 80s to the 2000s. And so they did another documentary interviewing different characters and their different perspectives. And then the other half of the book is Kat, the main girl, telling her perspective, because she didn't participate in the documentary. She just wanted to say her story from her point of view. So very interesting to see how the different stories like counter each other, but also how they tell one solid through line. And overall, I ate this book up so fast. It was so interesting and entertaining for me. If you, like me, love watching ice dancing at the Winter Olympics, this book will absolutely hit that spot in your brain. It's such a fun time, and I give it 5 stars. So with that being said, I've been yapping for a while and the AC still hasn't gone off, but I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. As always, subscribe. I post every Thursday. And if you want to watch my last video, I'll have it right here on the screen. Goodbye.